Did we just see the analytics bubble pop just a little bit? Let's dive down that rabbit hole. Tuesday night, World Series Game 6. Everybody was watching. Everyone knows what we're talking about. Blake Snell, Tampa Bay's pitcher, cruising along, dominating the game. But his analytics didn't match up with the eye test, and Kevin Cash, the Tampa manager, took him out of the game. 2-hitter, shutout, 5 1/3 innings. Promptly, next guy comes in, gives up the lead. Tampa loses the World Series. Bubba O'Neill. Is this the beginning of analytics getting a bit of a second look from some people, or do people look and say, this one didn't work out, but Kevin Cash used analytics all the way along, and that's the only reason they're in that position, so no change to analytics?
Well, with the uncertainty of when baseball is going to restart, it's certainly going to be a continuing discussion until we restart a new season. And the interesting thing is we just talked about this in its own little way, I think, where baseball is baseball dying conversation. And I know I had said something to the effect that the fact that managers have turned away from that touch and feel of a game as compared to, going with the numbers. This is just an absolute disaster for Tampa Bay. I mean, this was the best pitching performance of the entire playoffs for this team. Ace of the staff. He had allowed 2 hits. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And what I think what really bothers me worse, even more so, is if you look at the numbers, he was getting ready to face the top of the lineup, which at that time, going into the third time around, were 0 for 8 with 7 strikeouts. How do you take him out of the game?
Because Rick Zamperin, the answer to that, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, is that everybody knows by looking at the numbers, if you face a lineup a third time, you're going to get shelled, and therefore you must be removed regardless of what's happening.
Wrong answer. No. I mean, listen, the sabermetrics of baseball work in many instances. The managers have been playing the percentages for decades. But the fact of the matter is, when the numbers are in your favor, and they were in Blake Snell's favor, you continue to ride the hot hand. How can you not? This would be akin to taking a goaltender out in the third period because, hey, in the last 10 minutes, he's going to give up a couple of goals because the numbers say they will. I mean, you got to ride the hot hand. Managers of today's baseball have lost the feel and touch of the game. Maybe they don't trust themselves any longer because those numbers have proven, to be correct in certain instances. But the fact of the matter is that, Kevin Cash is going to wear this for the rest of his life if the Rays don't win it again. Blake Snell, unfortunately, is going to have to, think about this instance, this game that, could have, would have, should have been. It's unfortunate for the Rays and their fans, but Kevin Cash made the absolute wrong decision.
It's a wrong decision. I don't think it'll change a lot because Oakland, if you take a look at it, hasn't made the World Series since they started going to Moneyball. Right. Yeah. And they've done, and a lot of teams have covered that or have copied that, I should say. And so I don't think because especially teams that have less money, they're going to continue to do what he does. I think he wasn't looking at something else here, too. And that's recent analytics. His team wasn't hitting and they were striking out all the time. And now he would say, OK, well, that's where our metrics become really, really important here, that he holds it, that it's held now to 1 run. But I'm wondering just about the whole feel that gave the bench, especially when Snell, you saw his reaction. I mean, you saw his reaction on the bench. Those guys could hear those words, so that he was trying to keep it under, but it was obviously he was frustrated. He wasn't frustrated at himself just for being in that situation. He was frustrated at himself for having been taken out. The thing I don't like about this is now a team, how many pitchers did LA use last night? They used their 7. Okay, they got rewarded for that. That's another type of analytics that I don't like being rewarded here.
But Steve, you've covered baseball long enough. Let me go back to an example that popped to mind immediately yesterday as I was watching this. If analytics played the role they did, and I'm not against analytics, all right? I don't want to make the sense that I'm so old school that I don't want anyone to have a book or have any numbers. But there is no chance if analytics existed that Jack Morris pitches that game for Minnesota against Atlanta, that 10-inning legendary performance, and then Minnesota may not win. And the reason is because even if there were analytics, you use analytics as a tool, not as a slave to them. And
Well,
you can see a guy is cruising, you monitor because numbers say be careful, but you don't immediately fall over yourself just because the number tells you. You're not an actuary, you're a manager.
yeah, for younger viewers, what Scott's talking about is the 1991 World Series when Jack Morris pitched complete in Game 7, complete 10 games, and I think they won it in the bottom of the 10th, right?
Yeah.
And Minnesota won it in the bottom of the 10th, the World Series. But Jack Morris had also been doing that for 10 years, right? Pitching 9 sometime. I don't know if he ever pitched 10, but he certainly went 9 all the time. He had innings and innings and innings. So there was a bit of an analytics there available, personal analytics about him, not necessarily about the game itself. I just think that if he didn't pull him out, he's going to be and he gave up 2 or 3, then he's going to end up facing something the other way. I don't think he was thinking about that. He was thinking just this is what we do, and that's what we've always done. But if you look back as recently as Game 4, yes, there were circumstances they had to put the pinch hitter in, but they were won by a guy who couldn't get a hit. He was like 0 for his lifetime, right? So
but they were also down. They were also down on the bench. They didn't have a lot of options.
That's what I'm saying. There was a necessity involved there.
Yes, that was
and they didn't feel that necessity last night because they had their pen ready. But I think it looks good on the game for us to do, and thousands of people like us to analyze the way it is. Like, let's not just fall in lockstep all the time to this, because it's becoming not a really enjoyable thing to watch.
Bubba, will this change anything? Do you think managers will have a Kevin Cash moment sometimes in the future when they're thinking, I should probably go with the analytics, but I don't want to be cashed?
Well, I think it certainly does open up that discussion, and I hope it does. I can't tell the future, but I hope it does. I mean, and I think, Rick, you said the key word, trust. This is your ace of your staff. And the fact is, this is Game 6, with Game 7 being played tomorrow. He'd already thrown 73 pitches. He was not going to pitch today if there was a Game 7. So why not have his arm fall off, right? It didn't make any sense. And going back to that word trust, and I know you guys talked about 91, I don't think you need to go back that far. I mean, the legend of Bumgarner, right?
Mm-hmm.
The greatest pitching performance we've ever seen in postseason pitching performance. I mean, they just kept using him because he was hot. And then Blake Snell was hot last night. And you let someone beat you with your best, not some guy. And the worst part about it all is they had replaced Snell with a guy that had given up a run in 4 straight appearances. Nothing makes sense to me here.
Yeah. I think analytics can and should still be used in the composition of your roster makeup. If you can get a guy for cheaper who's going to be just as good or maybe even better in terms of the numbers and how he hits or how he fields or how he runs the bases or whatever the case is, if you can get an athlete who's just as good as the next guy but a lot cheaper, you're going to use those statistics and those analytics to make those decisions. But during the course of a game, I think the manager, and we've seen it countless of times, and obviously last night or Tuesday night was the heightened World Series that and there's no tomorrow for the Rays. But I think during the game, managers have to, and Bubby, you just said it, they have to trust that the guy who is hot is going to stay hot, or at least give you another 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 more innings of great pitching performances, and your hitters are going to find a few more runs.
What came to mind also, I heard something on the radio the other day, and it was an anecdote about a Beatles song. Can't remember which Beatles song it was, but it's one of their great legendary songs. And the story went that they were in studio and it was a 1-take recording, the singing part anyway, that I think it was Paul McCartney, and he went in the studio, and the first time he sang it, it was perfect and he nailed it. Well, at that point you go, all right, our analytics tell us that probably he should do 12 takes because that is what it normally takes. But sometimes if you know what you're doing and you're watching or listening, you can hear that something is out of the ordinary. It is particularly working. And that to me was Blake Snell. And that's where the analytics fall apart. I'm all for analytics, but sometimes if you're a manager, not just a babysitter or not just a holder of a binder, presumably you are that person who's able to discern that Paul McCartney nailed it. And Blake Snell was not following the analytics, and therefore let's not be a slave to the numbers. And that to me is the problem. It's the slavery to the numbers rather than using the numbers as a tool for you.
Well, over time, managers are hired by field managers are hired by general managers, right? And general managers
pass it down. Who pass it down?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And the longer that goes on, particularly in the minor leagues, as people learning how to be managers, though, the more you're going to get into this. But maybe this will come into some general managers' thinking. That's where it may have to happen is at the general manager level, where they sort of expand their mind to say, okay, how can we incorporate the two together? It's a hard thing to incorporate, because how do you the thing about numbers, all numbers, and that's why say in all businesses that involve any artistry at all, including all the businesses the four of us are in, we're a little bit against the bean counters, because we're saying you can't quantify some of the stuff that we do. And that's going to be the hard part. How do you quantify feel?
I think another factor in this too is, I'm not going to knock managers for having a game plan, because they should, but I think they're sticking to that game plan a little too ferociously. And probably case in point last night, Kevin Cash is thinking, man, if I can get, 6 innings out of Snell, and then we can go to the pen, and then we'll be good. And if we have the lead, we'll win the game and we'll force a game 7. And I think sticking to that game plan, makes sense in certain instances. But when your starter is on and is virtually unhittable, I don't know how you cannot deviate from that plan to say, all right, you know what, we're going to save our pen tonight. Snell might go 8 and we might win this game 1-0. I think going away from the game plan has to be always plan B, and maybe even plan 1A at times.
If they don't get that hit, does he get pulled?
There's no doubt flexibility plays a lot into that there. I totally agree with you. But he managed the game like it was game 122, right? And that's what bothers me. He managed it like it was a regular season game. And you know what? If Snell still had 15 more starts left in his regular season, I'm all for it. I get it. And there's going to be that discussion. And then you know what? Those situations do happen in the regular season all the time. Guys are throwing no hitters and they get pulled from games, or 1 hitters and pulled from games. And then we always discuss it the next day, and then it quiets out. This was game 6 of a must-win situation with your best player on the mound, and he got pulled. Here's another thing to consider, boys. If I'm Blake Snell and I go into free agency, and this is nothing against a personal thing, but do you not look at a team that maybe has a manager or philosophy that goes against that way of thinking? I would.
Well, it won't be him, because he just signed for 5 years there. But yes, I think it absolutely. I would not be surprised. I don't know how you do this, Bubba, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is now. In the past, Steve was covering the Jays when Roger Clemens, as I recall the story, wanted an extra locker or something so his kids could have. That there were perks that you would get that would come along with signing as a big free agent. Could you see a free agent saying, I want not to be following your analytics. If I'm going, I want to not be yanked out after. I don't know how you do that, but I could see that being something that an agent suddenly says that's a bargaining chip to be lured in as a free agent.
Well, maybe you look to a manager like a Dusty Baker and not like a nuanced guy, an old school manager.
Yeah, it's a potential that I don't see them ask. I mean, you could ask for it, but
I don't know how you do it.
Because there's another thing you can't. Again, how do you quantify that? How do you say when that's right? When that's a time where a lot of people will stay out there when they haven't got much. Well, I know I can get this next guy type of thing, but it's going to be difficult, because this was their shot, and we may see more of this depending on when the season starts next year and what players are available and how many of them are like core players, as we see in hockey, where you keep your 6 and you just see what you can do with the rest of them, either with young guys or with free agency, that kind of thing. You add an extra 20%. If the season starts late and it's shorter again, and there's all these, aren't we going to see more of this rather than less?
Well, we could, but to Bubba's point, and I think it's bang on, it's fine in the regular season. Not necessarily down the stretch when you're in a playoff run and you're a game behind and you have to win, but that's the difference. I think that sports is not a video game. Sports is not accounting. Sports there are numbers, but there is also the human element. And that's what I think got lost in this yesterday, is that you took out the human element, because Steve, you even mentioned it. It had an impact not just on the numbers, on the analytics, but it affects his teammates. It affects other things as well. And that to me is what analytics takes out of sports. It removes the human component that makes sports so compelling in the first place. And if we just want to have analytics and follow everything by a rigid set of rules, we don't need to play the games at all. You know, they always say it's the best team on paper. Literally what Kevin Cash was doing was trying to be the best team on paper. And it it doesn't always work.
Maybe sport is going that way. Maybe we're old-fashioned in that sense. And yes, we're lamenting the loss of drama and the loss of the seventh game, essentially. Potential loss of seventh. We don't know
I'm lamenting, Steve, the loss of the human component. I'm lamenting the loss of the human component.
That's right.
Sports not to just be about accountants.
Well, you know, we're heading so much the other way, and a lot of it has to do with the way that fans watch sports. You watch games mostly to see how the guy that you have on your fantasy team does, right? And straight up betting and all of those kinds of things. I mean, if this were about sort of the drama and the human factor, yes, all sports are down, but the ratings wouldn't have been continuing to drop during the World Series. They would have been going up as people heard that this has got some drama, this series.
Yeah, I think we watch too for it's the ultimate reality TV. It's the unknown. It's what's going to happen. And I think moments like Tuesday night, we're all screaming at our TVs or tablets thinking, you know, what are you doing? This guy's red hot, leave him in. But on the flip side too, we also, I think, enjoy the after effects of these catastrophic decisions, you know, to see the house kind of burn down and you know, all wagging our finger at the TV saying, hey, we told you so, you know, we should have left him in there. So, and the unpredictability of sports is why we watch.
Isn't it funny that the guy that finally wins the World Series is the guy that had the mentality that we're talking about, in the fact that he would continue to send Clayton Kershaw out there against the argument, against the book, against the analytics, because he felt like this guy was his ace of his staff. And, you know, on two occasions, at least in two playoff series, in some sense got burned. And in this year, he kind of utilized that mentality with Kershaw and ends up winning a World Series.
And Dave Roberts was heavily criticized this playoff even.
Yeah. And a lot of people would say, well, of course, you got all that money invested in Kershaw, and you look at the other guy you significantly invested money in this year in Mookie Betts, and boy, he made some contributions there, more than will be shown to the naked eye. But that's what the thing in Tampa Bay is. Who are they paying their money to? That guy.
That guy. Well, and one little epilogue point here, which I had forgotten until my son reminded me watching the game last night. It was Blake Snell, remember, at the beginning of this year, who said, I ain't playing if I don't get mine. This is the guy who was the hated at the start of the season. At the beginning, this is the guy who was the most hated player in baseball, the picture of greed. At the end of the season, at the very end, he's the guy we're talking about again as the picture of everything that was good with baseball. So the world spins on an odd axis sometimes. Folks, thanks for watching. Subscribe down below. Comment. Our Twitter handles are on the screen. We'd love to hear from you. We will talk to you again soon.